What you're about to witness is one of the most heartbreaking and beautiful moments ever captured in a courtroom. Judge Frank Caprio, known worldwide for his compassion and humanity, has seen thousands of cases walk through his Providence Municipal Court. But this particular day would leave him speechless, fighting back tears, and ultimately remind all of us what truly matters in life. The elderly man you'll meet today didn't know these would be among his final words. He didn't know that his simple traffic violation case would become a testament to love that would touch millions of hearts around the world. And he certainly didn't know that his humble plea would reveal the kind of devotion that most of us only dream of experiencing or witnessing. Judge Caprio has always been different from other judges. While most courtrooms feel cold and intimidating, his feels more like a neighborhood where everyone knows your name and your story matters. He's the judge who pays people's fines when they can't afford them, who hugs defendants instead of lecturing them, and who sees the person behind every case number. But even for someone who's witnessed countless human stories, what happened on this particular Tuesday morning was extraordinary. The defendant was 82-year-old Robert Martinez, a man whose weathered hands told stories of decades of hard work, whose gentle eyes reflected a lifetime of love, and whose frail frame carried the weight of recent devastating news. Robert had received a parking ticket 3 weeks earlier, a simple violation that normally would result in a quick fine and dismissal. But Robert's circumstances were anything but normal. As Robert slowly made his way to the defendant's stand that morning, using a walker to steady himself, everyone in the courtroom could sense something was different. His daughter Maria walked beside him, her eyes already glistening with unshed tears. His son Carlos followed close behind, his strong hand gently resting on his father's shoulder for support. This wasn't just about a parking ticket. This was about something much deeper, much more profound. Judge Caprio, with his characteristic warm smile, greeted Robert as he would any other defendant. "Good morning, Mr. Martinez. I see you're here." "About a parking violation. Can you tell me what happened?" What came next would transform an ordinary morning in municipal court into a moment that would resonate with people across the globe, touching hearts and reminding us all of what it means to love unconditionally. Robert's voice was soft but steady as he began to explain. "Your Honor, I know I parked illegally that day. I don't dispute that. But I need you to understand why." His eyes met Judge Caprio's, and in that moment, two men connected across generations, across different life experiences, united by the universal human experience of love and loss. The courtroom fell silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a moment, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, giving Robert his full attention. The same attention he gives every person who stands before him. But somehow this felt different. This felt sacred. "I was at the hospital visiting my wife of 58 years, Robert continued, his voice beginning to waver slightly. "Carmen has been battling cancer for the past 2 years, and the doctors told us that day that there wasn't much time left." The words hung in the air like a prayer, heavy with the weight of a love story that was nearing its end. Judge Caprio's expression softened even further, if that was possible. He's heard countless sob stories, genuine hardship tales, and desperate pleas. But there was something in Robert's demeanor, something in the way his children stood protectively beside him, something in the raw honesty of his words that made this different. This wasn't a man trying to get out of a ticket. This was a man trying to hold on to the most precious thing in his life. "I couldn't find legal parking anywhere near the hospital entrance," Robert explained. "Carmen can't walk very far anymore, and I needed to be as close as possible to help her. I saw the no parking zone, and I knew it was wrong, but I also knew my wife needed me. So I took the chance, hoping I'd be back before anyone noticed." Judge Caprio nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. He's presided over thousands of cases, but he's also lived long enough to understand the desperate measures love can drive us to take. "Tell me about Carmen," he said gently. And with those 4 words, he opened the floodgates to one of the most beautiful love stories ever told in a courtroom. Robert's entire demeanor changed as he began to speak about his wife. His shoulders straightened slightly, his voice grew stronger, and for a moment, the frail, elderly man transformed into the young soldier who had fallen in love with a beautiful nurse in 1965. "Carmen is everything to me, Your Honor. She's been my best friend, my partner, my reason for waking up every morning for almost 6 decades. The story that unfolded was like something from the pages of a romance novel, except it was real, lived, and written in the lines on Robert's face and the memories stored in his heart. He met Carmen during the Vietnam War when he was a wounded soldier in a military hospital, and she was the young nurse who changed his bandages and eventually changed his life forever. She had the most beautiful smile," Robert continued, his eyes taking on a distant look as he traveled back in time. "Even in that terrible place, surrounded by so much pain and suffering, Carmen could light up a room just by walking into it. She treated every patient like they were her own family, but there was something special between us from the very first day." Judge Caprio found himself completely absorbed in Robert's story, and he wasn't alone. Everyone in the courtroom, the bailiffs, the court clerks, the other defendants waiting their turn, had stopped what they were doing to listen. Maria and Carlos stood beside their father, tears streaming down their faces as they heard details of their parents' love story that they had never known before. Robert told them about how Carmen would sneak him extra dessert from the hospital cafeteria, how she would sit with him during her breaks and read him letters from home, how she held his hand during the painful physical therapy sessions that would eventually allow him to walk again. "She saved my life in that hospital, but more than that, she gave my life meaning." When Robert was discharged from the hospital, he was supposed to return to his hometown in Ohio. Carmen was from Providence, Rhode Island, nearly 1,000 miles away. "I knew I had a choice to make," Robert said, his voice growing emotional. "I could go home and try to forget about the angel who had healed my body and captured my heart, or I could follow love wherever it led me. The choice, of course, was obvious to anyone who has ever truly been in love." Robert moved to Providence, got a job at the local steel mill, and courted Carmen with all the determination of a man who knew he had found his soulmate. They were married 8 months later in a small ceremony at St. Mary's Church, with Carmen in her mother's wedding dress and Robert in his only suit, both of them believing they had forever ahead of them. "We weren't rich," Robert explained too. Judge Caprio, his voice filled with the contentment of a man who understood that wealth comes in many forms. "I worked double shifts at the mill, and Carmen worked part-time at the local clinic. We lived in a tiny apartment above Mrs. Sullivan's bakery, and some weeks we had to choose between paying the rent or buying groceries. But we were happy. We had each other, and that was enough." Their love story continued to unfold like a beautiful tapestry woven from shared dreams, mutual support, and unwavering devotion. They had their struggles: 3 miscarriages before Maria was born, Robert's layoff from the steel mill that forced him to take 3 part-time jobs, Carmen's mother's long illness that required them to move her in with them for 5 years. But through it all, their love not only endured but grew stronger. "Carmen never complained," Robert said, his voice filled with wonder even after all these years. "When I was out of work, she took on extra shifts at the clinic without me even asking. When her mother needed care, she welcomed her into our home, like it was the most natural thing in the world. When I was diagnosed with diabetes 15 years ago, she learned everything there was to know about managing it and changed our entire lifestyle to keep me healthy." Judge Caprio found himself thinking about his own marriage, his own wife, and the countless small acts of love that make a life together meaningful. He looked at Robert with growing admiration, recognizing in this elderly man something that seems increasingly rare in today's world: A love that has been tested by time and hardship and emerged not just intact, but more beautiful for having endured. Your Honor, Robert continued, Carmen and I made a promise to each other on our wedding day. We promised to love each other in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do us part. I've kept that promise for 58 years, and I intend to keep it until my last breath. The courtroom was completely silent now, everyone hanging on Robert's every word. This wasn't just a story about a parking ticket anymore. This was a masterclass in what it means to love someone completely, unconditionally, and forever. As Robert's story continued, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted from one of casual interest to one of profound reverence. Judge Caprio, known for his quick wit and occasional humor, found himself completely serious, completely present, completely absorbed in the testimony of love and devotion unfolding before him. 2 years ago, Robert said, his voice beginning to shake with emotion, Carmen started feeling tired all the time. At first, we thought it was just age catching up with us. We're both in our 80s now, after all. But the fatigue got worse, and then came the weight loss, and then the pain that she tried so hard to hide from me. Robert paused, gathering strength for what came next. His daughter Maria reached out and gently touched his arm, offering silent support, while his son Carlos wiped away tears he didn't even realize had started falling. When the doctor told us it was pancreatic cancer, Carmen's first worry wasn't about herself. She looked at me and said, Roberto, mi amor, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I'm going to leave you. Can you imagine? She was apologizing to me for getting sick. Judge Caprio felt his own throat tighten. In his decades on the bench, he had developed a professional emotional distance that allowed him to hear difficult stories without becoming overwhelmed. But there was something about Robert's raw honesty, something about the pure love in his voice when he spoke about Carmen that was breaking through all his defenses. The doctor said she might have 6 months, maybe a year if we were lucky. And the treatments worked, Robert continued. That was 2 years ago. Carmen has fought this disease with the same courage and determination she's shown in everything else in our life together. She's endured chemotherapy, radiation, surgeries, experimental treatments, anything that might give us a little more time together. Robert's voice grew stronger as he talked about Carmen's bravery in the face of her illness. She still wakes up every morning and tries to make me breakfast, even when she can barely stand. She still asks about my day, still listens to my stories about the garden or the neighbors, still laughs at my terrible jokes. She's still taking care of me, even when she's the one who needs care. The daily reality of their situation began to emerge as Robert continued his testimony. I've become her full-time caregiver, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I help her dress in the morning. I prepare all her meals according to the special diet the doctors recommended. I drive her to every appointment, every treatment, every test. When she's too weak to walk, I carry her. When she's in pain, I sit with her and hold her hand until it passes. Judge Caprio found himself thinking about the profound role reversal that often comes with long marriages, how the person who once cared for you becomes the person you care for, and how true love makes that transition feel not like a burden, but like a privilege. Mr. Martinez, he said gently, it sounds like you've been through an incredible ordeal. How are you holding up? Robert's answer revealed the depth of his character and the strength of his love. Your Honor, I won't lie to you. It's been the hardest 2 years of my life. I'm exhausted most of the time. I worry constantly. I watch the woman I love suffer, and there's nothing I can do to fix it. I pray every night for a miracle, and I wake up every morning knowing that our time is limited. He paused, looking directly at Judge Caprio with eyes that held both profound sadness and unshakable determination. But I also wake up every morning grateful for another day with her. grateful for another chance to tell her I love her, another opportunity to hold her hand, another moment to see her smile. The doctors say she doesn't have long now. Maybe weeks, maybe days. That makes every second precious. The courtroom was completely silent, except for the sound of people quietly crying. Even the court stenographer had tears streaming down her face as she continued to type Robert's words. Judge Caprio realized that he was witnessing something extraordinary. Not just a love story, but a masterclass in what it means to face life's greatest challenge with grace, dignity, and unwavering commitment. "That brings us to the day I got the parking ticket," Robert said, bringing the story back to the legal matter at hand. Carmen had been having a particularly difficult week. The pain was getting worse and she wasn't keeping food down. The doctors wanted to see her right away to discuss adjusting her pain medication and to talk about making her more comfortable. Robert's euphemistic language couldn't hide the reality of what he was describing: the transition from treatment to palliative care, the acknowledgement that the fight was nearing its end. I knew this appointment was important, maybe one of the last times Carmen would be strong enough to leave the house. I couldn't bear the thought of her having to walk a long distance from a parking spot, especially when every step causes her pain. The parking violation suddenly took on an entirely different meaning. This wasn't a case of convenience or laziness or disregard for the law. This was a desperate act of love by a man trying to protect his dying wife from even the smallest unnecessary suffering. "I circled that hospital block 3 times looking for legal parking," Robert explained. "Every spot was taken. I could see Carmen getting more tired and uncomfortable in the passenger seat with each passing minute. Finally, I saw the no parking zone right in front of the main entrance. I knew it was wrong. I knew I might get a ticket. But I also knew that my wife needed me to make the choice that put her comfort and dignity above my own convenience. So I parked there, helped her out of the car, and got her inside as quickly as I could." Judge Caprio was beginning to understand that this case represented something much larger than a traffic violation. It represented the impossible choices that caregivers make every day, the way love compels us to act even when we know there might be consequences, and the profound dignity of a person who puts someone else's needs above their own. Judge Caprio looked at Robert Martinez with the kind of understanding that can only come from a lifetime of witnessing human nature in all its complexity. He had heard every excuse, every sob story, every attempt to avoid responsibility that exists in the book. But what he was hearing now wasn't an excuse. It was a testament to the power of love to transform ordinary people into heroes. "Mr. Martinez," Judge Caprio said softly, his voice carrying none of its usual judicial authority and all of its human compassion, "I want you to know that I understand why you made the choice you did. But before I make my decision about this case, is there anything else you'd like to tell the court?" What happened next would become the moment that everyone present would remember for the rest of their lives. Robert looked at his children, then back at Judge Caprio, and his entire body seemed to deflate slightly as the weight of his reality settled over him. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but every word carried the force of a man who knew he was running out of time to say everything that needed to be said. "Your Honor, I know you have the power to fine me, and if that's what you decide, I'll find a way to pay it. But I need you to understand that this ticket, this fine, this whole situation, none of it matters compared to what I'm facing at home." Robert's voice began to break as he continued. "The doctors told us yesterday that Carmen has maybe 2 weeks left. 2 weeks to say goodbye to the love of my life." The courtroom was so quiet that everyone could hear Judge Caprio's sharp intake of breath. Even he, with all his experience with human tragedy and triumph, was not prepared for the raw emotion of Robert's revelation. Maria began to sob openly, while Carlos put his arm around his sister and fought to maintain his own composure. "I've been thinking about what I want to say to her in these last days," Robert continued, his voice growing stronger as he spoke about the woman who had been his everything for nearly 6 decades. I want to tell her about every day she made better, just by being in it. I want to thank her for choosing me when she could have had anyone. I want to make sure she knows that loving her has been the greatest privilege of my life. Robert paused, wiping his eyes with a handkerchief that looked like it had been pressed by Carmen's loving hands countless times over the years. But most of all, I want to tell her that she doesn't need to worry about me. I want her to know that I'll be okay, that our children will take care of me, that she can let go in peace, knowing she's given me a lifetime of love that will sustain me until we meet again. Judge Caprio found himself fighting back tears of his own. In 30 years, on the bench, he had never been more moved by anything he had heard in his courtroom. This wasn't just about a parking ticket anymore. This was about love in its purest, most selfless form. This was about a man who had dedicated his entire adult life to loving one woman and was now facing the prospect of continuing that life without her. "Mr. Martinez," Judge Caprio said, his voice thick with emotion, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. If you could go back to that day at the hospital, knowing that you would get this ticket, would you make the same choice again?" Robert's answer came without hesitation, delivered with the conviction of a man who had never doubted where his priorities lay. "Your Honor, I would make that choice every single day for the rest of my life. I would risk 100 parking tickets, 1,000 parking tickets if it meant sparing Carmen even one moment of discomfort or pain. She's given me everything good in my life. The least I can do is give her everything I have in return." The power of Robert's words seemed to reverberate through the courtroom like a bell. Here was a man who understood what it meant to love someone more than yourself, who had lived that love every single day for almost 60 years, and who was now facing the ultimate test of that love, learning how to let go. "I know I broke the law that day," Robert continued, "but I also know I kept a more important promise. The promise I made to Carmen on our wedding day to put her needs before my own, to protect her, to care for her, to love her with everything. I have until my last breath. If that means I have to pay a fine, then I'll pay it gladly, because it was worth it to save her from having to walk those extra steps when every step is agony for her." Judge Caprio stood up from his chair, something he rarely did during proceedings. The formal structure of the courtroom seemed inadequate for the moment they were all sharing. This had transcended law and entered the realm of pure human experience. Love, loss, sacrifice, and the courage to face both life and death with dignity. "Mr. Martinez," Judge Caprio said, walking around his desk to stand closer to the elderly man who had just given him and everyone present a master class in what it means to love unconditionally. "I have been a judge for 3 decades. I have heard thousands of cases, listened to countless stories, and made decisions that have affected thousands of lives. But I have never, in all my years on this bench, heard anything that has moved me as much as what you've shared with us today." The judge's voice was steady but filled with profound respect as he continued. "You have shown us what true love looks like. You have demonstrated the kind of character and devotion that most of us aspire to, but few of us achieve. You have reminded all of us what really matters in this life, not parking tickets or fines or legal technicalities, but the people we love and the promises we make to them." Judge Caprio paused, looking at Robert with the kind of admiration usually reserved for war heroes or saints. "Your love for Carmen is evident in every word you've spoken, every choice you've made, every sacrifice you've been willing to make. You are an inspiration to everyone in this courtroom and everyone who will hear your story." What happened next would become one of the most shared, most talked about moments in internet history. Judge Caprio looked at Robert Martinez with tears openly streaming down his face, something court observers had never seen before, and made a decision that came not from legal precedent but from the deepest wells of human compassion. "Mr. Martinez," Judge Caprio said, his voice barely controlled, This court finds you not guilty of the parking violation." The words hung in the air for a moment before he continued. "More than that, I am dismissing this case entirely, and I want you to know that if I could, I would personally ensure that you never have to worry about parking again when you're taking care of Carmen." The courtroom erupted in quiet applause, but Judge Caprio wasn't finished. He walked over to Robert and did something unprecedented in his courtroom. He embraced the elderly man, holding him as a father might hold a son, as one human being holds another in a moment of shared understanding about what truly matters in life. "Robert," Judge Caprio said, using his first name now, all formality abandoned, "I want you to go home to Carmen. I want you to hold her hand and tell her all. The things you need to tell her. I want you to spend every precious moment you have left together, and I want you to know that you will never have to worry about something as trivial as a parking ticket when you're caring for the woman you love." But Judge Caprio's compassion went even further. Reaching into his own wallet, he pulled out $200 and pressed it into Robert's hands. "This is for whatever you and Carmen need," he said quietly. "Gas money to get to the hospital, money for her medications, money for anything that might make her more comfortable. It's not much, but it's offered with the respect and admiration I have for the love you've shown us all today." Robert was overcome with emotion, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks as he struggled to find words adequate to express his gratitude. "Your Honor," he finally managed, "you didn't have to do this. You didn't have to show us this kindness. I came here prepared to pay whatever fine you felt was appropriate, and instead you've given me something far more valuable. You've given me hope that there's still goodness in this world." Judge Caprio's response revealed the depth of his character and the reason why millions of people around the world have come to love and respect him. "Robert, you're wrong about one thing. I did have to do this, not because the law required it, but because my conscience required it, because my heart required it, because after hearing your story, doing anything else would have been a betrayal of everything I believe about justice, compassion, and what it means to be human." The judge continued, his voice filled with the conviction of a man who understood that some moments transcend the ordinary business of life and become opportunities to affirm our shared humanity. "You see, Robert, real justice isn't just about applying laws and imposing penalties. Real justice is about understanding context, recognizing love when we see it, and acknowledging that sometimes the most lawful thing we can do is to show mercy to someone whose only crime was loving too much." As Robert prepared to leave the courtroom, supported by his children who were equally moved by the judge's extraordinary display of compassion, he turned back one more time to address Judge Caprio. What he said next would become the moment that millions of viewers would remember, share, and quote for years to come. "Your Honor, Judge Caprio, I want you to know that I will tell Carmen about today. I will tell her about the kindness you showed us, about the way you listened to our story, about the compassion you demonstrated to two strangers who came into your courtroom. I will tell her that there are still people in this world who understand what love looks like, who recognize it when they see it, and who honor it when they encounter it." Robert paused, his voice growing stronger as he prepared to deliver words that would resonate far beyond the walls of that Providence courthouse. "Carmen always told me that love doesn't just exist between two people. It radiates outward, touching everyone it encounters, making the whole world a little brighter, a little kinder, a little more hopeful. Today, you proved her right. Your compassion has touched our family in ways you'll never fully understand, and I know that Carmen will spend her final days knowing that we were blessed not just with each other, but with people like you who still believe in the power of love to change everything." Judge Caprio was visibly moved by Robert's words, and his response encapsulated why his courtroom has become a beacon of hope for people around the world. "Robert, you and Carmen have given me and everyone here today a gift far more valuable than anything I could give you. You've reminded us what real love looks like, what real commitment means, and what it truly means to honor the promises we make to the people who matter most to us. As Robert slowly made his way out of the courtroom, leaning on his walker and flanked by his loving children, everyone present stood in silent tribute to a man who had just demonstrated the very best of what it means to be human. Judge Caprio watched him go, knowing that he had just witnessed something extraordinary. Not just a love story, but a testament to the enduring power of devotion, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment. The video of this courtroom exchange would go on to be viewed millions of times around the world, touching hearts in every country, every culture, every walk of life. People would share Robert's story with their own families, use his example to remember what matters most in their own relationships, and find inspiration in his unwavering dedication to the woman he loved. But perhaps most importantly, Robert did exactly what he promised to do. He went home to Carmen and spent their remaining days together, sharing the story of the judge who saw their love for what it truly was. Not just a personal commitment between two people, but a shining example of what makes life worth living. And when Carmen passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 weeks later, she died knowing that their love story had touched countless lives and reminded the world that in an age of cynicism and division, true love still exists, still matters, and still has the power to change everything it touches. This is why Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom is different. This is why millions of people around the world look to him as an example of what justice can look like when it's tempered with compassion, informed by wisdom, and guided by the recognition that we are all human beings deserving of dignity, respect, and understanding. And this is why Robert Martinez's simple traffic violation became something far more significant. A reminder that love, when it's real and true and lasting, has the power to transform not just the people who experience it, but everyone who witnesses it.